A meerkat digs up a beetle grub and turns to eat it. When an alarm call cuts through the air, sharp and urgent, the exact sound a hawk overhead should trigger, it drops the food and bolts for the burrow. But there's no hawk in the sky. Perched nearby, a fork-tailed drongo swoops down and takes the abandoned meal for itself. That's not an accident, that's a lie, and it worked. So here's the actual test this video is chasing. Not, does the animal use a signal that benefits itself? Nearly every species does that. The test is narrower. Does the animal cause a false belief in another mind on purpose, because that false belief will make the other animal do something useful to it? Camouflage doesn't count under this test. Neither does a moth's eye spot or a flower's fake nectar guide. Those tricks are fixed, built in, the same every single time, whether or not they're working. Real deception has to bend with the audience. It has to fail sometimes, and it has to adjust. 4 animals. 4 completely different tricks. Start with the bird that opened this video. In South Africa's Kalahari Desert, researcher Tom Flower spent years following wild fork-tailed drongos as they trailed meerkats and pied babblers on their foraging rounds. Drongos have their own alarm call, but that's only the beginning. They can also mimic the alarm calls of dozens of other species, sound for sound, close enough to fool the original owner. When a target found something worth eating, the drongo would sometimes raise a false alarm, its own or a mimicked one, and the forager would flee to cover, food abandoned on the ground. Does it work? A drongo can get up to a quarter of its daily food this way. But the trick has an obvious weak point. Cry wolf too often with the same sound, and the target learns to ignore it. Flower found that drongos solve this by switching. When one false alarm stopped fooling a particular bird, the drongo tried a different call next time, and that alone was often enough to fool the exact same target all over again. Not a fixed trick, a strategy that responds to failure. If a bird can lie with its voice, what about an animal with no voice built for lying at all? In the shallow reefs where mourning cuttlefish gather to breed, males compete hard for access to females, and a dominant male will guard his mate against every rival nearby. Smaller males can't win that fight directly, so some of them cheat with their skin. A cuttlefish's entire body is covered in cells that shift color and pattern in an instant. Researchers filming these breeding groups found small males doing something remarkable, displaying bold striped courtship colors on the side of the body facing the female, while simultaneously showing dull, mottled, distinctly female-looking colors on the opposite side, facing the rival male. The rival male, seeing only a female pattern on the near side, has no reason to attack. The female, seeing the true courtship pattern, receives the real message. It isn't a fixed disguise either. Males use the split display selectively, mostly with exactly one rival to fool, and they drop the trick entirely once a second rival raises the odds of getting caught. Courtship and camouflage running on the same body at the same time. Primates take a more physical route. In one classic setup, a chimpanzee who had personally watched a researcher hide food was paired with a second chimpanzee, an informed witness, and a witness of that witness. The informed chimp began walking toward the true hiding spot, but the second chimp, dominant and desperate to get there first, started to overtake her on the path. Who gets the food? She peeled off, walked toward an empty patch of ground instead, and let the dominant chimp search it, uselessly. Only once he'd fully committed to the wrong spot did she quietly double back and collect the food for herself. This built on decades of earlier work, going back to field studies in the 1970s, that found the same basic move again and again. Informed, lower-ranking animals learning to lead the powerful away from exactly what they want. Ravens cache food constantly, and other ravens steal from those caches whenever they get the chance. Researchers built 2 connected chambers with a window between them that could be covered or left open. A caching raven, watched by a rival through the open window, guarded its cache carefully, checking back on it less often, hiding its exact movements. Then the researchers covered the window completely, so the rival was no longer visible at all. And the caching raven still behaved as if it might be watched, still adjusted its guarding, tracking a mind it can no longer see. None of this settles the deepest question. Critics point out that every one of these behaviors could, in principle, be pure learned association. Drongo learns switch call, food resues. Chimp learns walk toward empty spot, dominant leaves. Raven learns hide more when a rival was recently in the room, without any of them representing what's actually happening inside another creature's head. Researchers who build simple reinforcement models can reproduce versions of all four results without giving the model anything resembling a theory of mind. That's not proof the animals lack one. It's proof that behavior alone can't settle it in any species, including ours. But here's what isn't in dispute. Whatever is happening inside the drongo, the cuttlefish, the chimpanzee, the raven, it is flexible. It tracks whether the trick is working, and it changes the moment that trick stops, which brings us back to that meerkat colony, quiet now, the stolen meal long gone. A different drongo lets out a call somewhere across the scrub, maybe true, maybe not. There's no way to tell just from the sound of it. Maybe for the drongo, there was never much difference between the two. Somewhere between the false alarm, the split signal skin, the misdirected walk, and the guarded cache is one very old, very simple question. What does it take to know what's happening in another mind? Nobody has a clean answer, human or otherwise. But somewhere right now, a drongo is choosing which call to make, a cuttlefish is choosing which side to show, a chimpanzee is choosing which way to walk, and a raven is deciding how closely to guard something it can no longer be sure anyone is watching. That's not nothing. Whatever it is, some part of every one of these animals is already reaching carefully into a mind that isn't its own. For a mind it cannot see inside. Some part of it already knows. And somewhere close by, fork-tailed drongo circles once and says nothing at all.